Hey, friends and revolutionaries, it's Masters of the Universe time again, and I am totally stoked. I hope you are too. By virtue of how long this video is going to be, or the fact that I'm going to split it into part 1 and part 2, or I don't know how I'll be doing it, depends on how much time I get, we're going to dive very deeply into these two characters, which is King Hssss, with 2 extra S's and no Y, because that's easier to copyright. As well as, if you've enjoyed the Minicom history that I've shown in the past, we're going to delve really pretty deep into probably the largest overarching story of the Minicoms. Probably the biggest arching story that was told in the Minicoms. And I hope you enjoy it. It's something where I think that it's very, very interesting. And had these 2 figures, starting with King Hssss, Pre-Eternian He-Man, the bonus figure being the other one, had these not been released as close together, I probably wouldn't have discovered it or recognized it for how awesome it is. So I really, really hope you enjoy it, and maybe appreciate what we get here a little bit more. But first, King Hssss. King Hssss is shipping package and the figure. Very, very cool. Very nice. I only had a King Hssss for a very short period. I don't know what happened to it. I think I let a friend borrow it and I never got it back. But I remember him so well now looking at him in this packaging. He is so cool. He's got the Snake Men sticker on there, as it's typical for the Grayskull, Princess of Power, Horde. They're all going to have their appropriate Alliance stickers on there, so that's really cool. We've got King Hssss, dreadful disguised leader of the Snake Men. Dreadful disguise. I don't know. Looks like green scales to me. We'll have to see. Typical Master Universe classic packaging. Got the air holes on the side, but only one. The Great Dimple, Lightning, Brickwork, Master Universe logo, and other characters that were prominent during his time. That's kind of what the theme of these backgrounds are, is it's not showing anything new, just these are characters that were prominent during the time that King Hssss was. So we've got Hordak, Skeletor, King Hssss, of course, He-Man, King Grayskull, and Zodak with a K. On his right up, you see the picture of King Hssss, looking very, very nice. Real name, Hssss of the Viper House, a servant of the Unnamed One. Hssss was chosen to lead the army of Snake Men to the planet of Eternia, to plunder its magical secrets. He ruled Eternia for 3 centuries until a rebellion formed under Divan Grayskull. Soon afterwards, the Horde invaded and Hssss was drawn into a 3-way war. All 3 sides agreed to a temporary truce in order to construct the 3 towers. 3 towers? What? But Hssss was betrayed by Hordak and in time was banished to the void by the elders and by Zodak. For 5 centuries, he and his armies waited until Evelyn and a Snake Man descendant named Cobra Khan opened the snake pit to free them. Really? King Hssss often tricked foes by appearing heroic, but then transformed into a seething mass of serpents and led the Snake Men into battle. Well, yeah, that's true. But tell you what, take a look at this little ditty and tell me what you think. Be right back.
Starting in 1981, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe was a phenomenal success. First as an action figure line, but going into comics, cartoons, full-length animated feature movie, and a spin-off series, the franchise lasted all the way until 1987 with the live-action release of Masters of the Universe. Now, some people might consider this to be the headstone of the series, but I actually did enjoy it, with Dolph Lundgren, Frank Langella, Meg Foster as Evil Lynn, and a very young Courtney Cox, and Robert Duncan McNeil. That's Tom Paris from Star Trek's Voyager, if anyone doesn't recognize the name. Getting back to the Masters of the Universe, by 1985, the series had begun its decline, and creators were looking into a new story for our hero. What they had put together was something that would be known as Masters of the Universe, The Power of Grayskull. A world in pre-Eternian history in which He-Man would still play a prominent role, fighting alongside his ancient ancestors among a new set of villains with new allies. To bridge the gap between the original series and the Power of Grayskull series, which technically was going to take place in the past, Mattel had put together a three-part story that would be told in the mini-comics, the first issue being The Power of Grayskull, The Legend Begins. It is unfortunate that this first part in what would have been a three-part story telling us about Pre-Eternia and setting up the Power of Grayskull story was the only one that actually got published. The He-Man and the Master Universe cartoon had been canceled, the Master Universe toy line had come to an end, and the Power of Grayskull project had barely gotten off the ground. And though we never got to find out what happened in the last two chapters of the Power of Grayskull trilogy, during my research for the Pre-Eternian He-Man and King Hiss figures, I found that with two pre-existing mini-coms, King of the Snake Men and Ultimate Battleground, the Legend Begins, ironically what was the first chapter in that three-part story, actually bridges the story of the Master Universe to the Power of Grayskull quite nicely. The first story in this unofficial trilogy is King of the Snake Men, the introductory of King Hiss. And I do see introduction as opposed to origin, because King Hiss is an ancient evil from Pre-Eternian history. And kudos to the 2000X series, both for getting that part right, and for making his freedom from the dark dimension part a little more interesting than what we see here in the minicom. The chapter opens with Skeletor sensing a great power deep within the caverns of Snake Mountain, a place no one's investigated before. Considering how long Skeletor's been at Snake Mountain, and the fact that he'll cross time and dimensions to get an edge over He-Man, at some point you figured he would have checked his own basement. Cobra Khan serves as the Skeletor minion of the issue, but far from being the young, militant Snake Men instrumental in the release of King Hiss as he was in the 2002 series, here he comes off as just a cowardly lackey who doesn't waste a panel of dialogue telling Skeletor what a bad idea all this is. In the chamber, Skeletor discovers a message in ancient Snake Men that reads, "He who feeds the pool of power shall know the secret of King Hiss." And because Skeletor's middle name is Bad Idea, Skella Bad Ideator, he gives it a magic whammy and sets the great King Hiss on Eternia again. Back at the palace, Prince Adam receives a psychic message from the sorceress, who warns there's great danger at Snake Mountain. Really? That place where all the bad guys are. Yeah, I think that's true most of the time. You know, how about a little more detail, I mean, had I not known better, I would say that this was the sorceress already under King Hiss's control, laying an elaborate trap for He-Man. And, yeah, just to spoil it for you, it's a trap. Now here is where I think the minicom made a bit of a mistake. Rather than actually seeing the reveal of King Hiss earlier, if we'd only seen Skeletor giving the pool a magic whammy, and then a close-up of him and Cobra Khan staring in shock at something off-panel, it would have made this moment of some stranger being attacked by Skeletor and He-Man's heroic leap to his rescue all that more exciting. Particularly when he turns back to the stranger and the trap is sprung as King Hiss reveals his true self to He-Man and uses hypnotic gaze to knock him out. When He-Man awakes, he finds himself in the cavern with the portal of the Snake Men. He's surrounded by a force field created by Skeletor and King Hiss, so powerful that even he can't break through. So even though he can't get to them, he does get a monologuing, and you can really tell that King Hiss is going to be one of the nasty ones, because he can monologue. He spends a whole page going on about his army of Snake Men, who rode across ancient Eternia taking over the planet. His plan, with Skeletor's help, is to summon the rest of the Snake Men army from the same dimension he was freed from. Now, why there isn't more finger-pointing, I'm not sure, but when Skeletor and King Hiss give the portal a double whammy, they fail to free any of the ancient Snake Men, but rather pull two modern Snake Men from the surface of Hordak on Etheria. By this time, Hordak didn't have any interest in Eternia, and was fully established as a She-Ra villain on Etheria. Seeing King Hiss with two of his servants, He-Man knows it's time to take action. He draws his sword, but is quickly disarmed by Ratlor, who presents it to King Hiss, who plans on using it as a key to unlock the portal and releasing the rest of his army. He-Man, using his flying fist powers, don't get me started, manages to break the force field and create a cave-in that cuts off Skeletor, King Hiss, and the other Snake Men from the portal. With what little time he has left, He-Man, in a scene that would make King Arthur proud, draws his sword from the portal, barely escape being pulled in himself. He seals it off and cuts himself an escape from the cavern, just as King Hiss and Skeletor clear the avalanche. Seeing the portal sealed and realizing that freeing the rest of his army may be impossible, King Hiss and the other Snake Men vow to rebuild their armies in this time in Eternia. Skeletor orders Cobra Khan to join them as a rank in King Hiss's army, and Skeletor and King Hiss form an evil alliance where we see the first of many occasions where they share thoughts of stabbing each other in the back. Back at the palace, Adam tells Orko about how he was tricked by King Hiss's disguise. Orko tells him that in future He-Man should think twice about trying to save anyone who appears to be in trouble. Adam counters by saying that as He-Man, he will help anyone who appears to be in trouble, even if it puts him in danger of being trapped again.
Alright, well, now that we've seen where King Hiss is from, let's take a look and see where he is now. And he's really come home, I gotta say. This is a terrific interpretation of that old vintage figure. I mean, this is a fantastic King Hiss. So much nicer. And I know some of you guys aren't going to like it, but so much better than the way he was the way he was conceived for the 2000X version. You know, the 2000X version, you know, with the long face and kind of almost the pharaoh kind of helmet. I didn't like it. I really didn't. You know, it kind of went against the original intention of the character. But here, just outstanding, just fantastic. The scale work on it, everything looks great. Now, I'm going to go ahead and address the elephant in the room, just to go ahead and get out of the way. Maddie, a lot of people before that made a point of saying that the shoulders on King Hiss were on backwards. And yes, they are. Noticeably so. Noticeably so. There is a website where you can find some really awesome Master Universe conversions that actually show you how to open up this armor. Which, you know, funny enough, of all the figures that need to have to get to the inside of the chest and swap it around, King Hiss's armor is the only one that doesn't actually come off. It doesn't pop open and come off. So, you know, they really made a point of saying, okay, the shoulders are staying this way, even though they're wrong. So, there is a website that will show you how you can get all this off, how you can get them apart, and swap the shoulders out. I'm going to leave it this way. First off, I don't want to run the risk of tearing this figure up. Second, this is the original release. This is the way Mattel released him. This is what I'm going to get. I might buy one of the re-releases with the original burst on it that has the corrected shoulders. At some point I might do that. But this is the way he was originally released. This is my original King Hiss. I'm going to keep the shoulders wrong. But that aside, if you don't waste too much time pointing that out, you've got to just appreciate how well he comes out. I mean, the look on the face, it just oozes the original vintage series. I mean, everything from the slitted eyes, the slight smirk that he has. You know, this is such a classic version of him. It is just fantastic. Got the Keldor boots, which I think that's a little different, but it fits. It fits. And it looks great. The colors, I love the green. There's not a whole lot. Well, there is. There is some wash and some black across him to give it some depth and some relief. But for the most part, he's pretty consistent, the same color, despite there being different plastics. You know, it all kind of matches together. It doesn't seem, you know, obvious where one type of plastic stops and the other kicks in, which is, you know, actually pretty nice. On this articulation for this torso, and you'll see what I mean here in a minute, the head does turn left and right, goes up and down. Despite the shoulders are wrong, they do come up and out. Not very far, but they do come up and out. Twist of the bicep, elbow, and wrist. He has his crunch, even inside that piece of body armor. Which, you know, when you look at the body armor, you can see that the abs in his six-pack. I mean, he has the typical Master Universe kind of, you know, manly man, you know, ripped physique, but it's all in scale work, which is kind of cool. You know, he has the same muscle tone, it's just in scales. That's kind of nifty. There is a twist, which we'll get to in a minute, a little bit more on in a minute. Doesn't have the shaggy shorts, but he's got his scales, kind of Aquaman shorts. Got the scales on the legs with a twist, comes up and out. And kind of like Bo, it's an actual genuine torso, or a lower torso. It's not just like, you know, hanging shag, you know, like hanging fur. Single joint at the knee, twist of the boot, and at the foot. So, typical Master Universe Classics articulation, at least in this form. We'll go ahead and swap out for the second. Now, as anyone remembers, King Hiss originally was almost like a shell former, where he would literally pop apart, and inside there would be his true form hidden inside. Well, thanks to the Plastic Man figure, Mattel has pretty much come up with the peg technology so that they can swap torsos in and out via a peg. And though I don't have the Plastic Man figure, keep those there, just looking at the peg on this one, as well as on his inside piece that we'll take a look at, yeah, I'm kind of scared that if you pop these in and out too often, it's just either going to wear out or break off. So more likely than not, this is the one that I'm going to have him on display with. But it is King Hiss, so whenever you took off his torso, inside was his multi-headed, you know, kind of seething snake body. And it's actually really good. It's a lot like Copperhead with the scales being sculpted on. Nice big red eyes. Fangs on there. Looks really, really good. Now, it is made of a very soft plastic. And the reason for that being is that there's really not much in the way of articulation. He has kind of the Gumby arm articulation, meaning that there are wires inside the snakes. And really, for the most part, they're pretty good. Whoa, see, already popping apart. It's actually pretty good. I mean, you can twist it into a lot of poses, and the wire inside is pretty sturdy, so it holds itself really, really well. So it's real tempting to try and decide which of these two I'm going to have him on display with. Just to kind of give you a better shot of him with the legs. If I can get him to stand up. Come on now. It's a real tough choice because of how well they did the arms on the snakes and the fact that, you know, it really holds itself very, very well. But again, this top piece on mine just pops out way too easy. And the only real genuine kind of joint articulation he has is on his jaw. Now, it is very cool. You can open his mouth pretty wide. But being that the hinge is so soft, it doesn't open very far. And every time I try and push it open, I'm always afraid that it's going to pop off the peg. It's going to pop itself off. So, I mean, very, very cool. That's just so, so nice. But I do think that for display purposes, we're going to go ahead and keep his more heroic human look on there. Another reason for it is because of his accessories. He can't really wear these in his snake form. The first is his shield, which is basically just a red shield with the Snake Man logo on it, like on his chest. It's got a little extra paint, some highlights on it. You can see some sculpting on the snake. And it just clips onto his hand. It's got a good clip too. The clips are getting much better on the shields. Don't see as many stress marks taking it on and off. King Hiss also comes with his staff, which is a good representation or a copy of the one that came with the vintage figure. I was just never impressed with it the first time around. So even though it's a very nice update and modern version of it, yeah, I just didn't like it the first time. So, you know, I'm definitely going to keep him with it because, I mean, he looks cool holding it. But, I don't know, it just seems way too bulky. And definitely almost strikes me as the intertwined snakes you see on like a first aid kit. So, you know, kind of inappropriate for a villain. But that's a taking a look at King Hiss from the Master Universe Classics line. Very cool figure. Definitely recommend getting him, even if he has his shoulders the wrong way around. I'd say that if you can find him, or if they re-release him, certainly a pretty sweet character to have. One you don't want to miss out on. He's a key character. And stick around to take a look at the next chapter as to why.
There are two elements to the story that I think make it a good strong link to the Power of Grayskull story. First off, the return of King Hiss. You really get a good idea of what the world was like back when he was its main bad guy. Second, and most importantly, we get the mythologies of Pre-Eternia. By He-Man's time, even King Hiss had only been a myth that turned out to be true. This idea of myths of the past now taking place in He-Man's time carries us into the second chapter, The Ultimate Battleground. A peaceful day on Eternia is cut short as an earthquake hits the planet. The guy from the brownie paper towel packaging, Rio Blast, he was one of the last heroes that was released for the series, says that the first earthquake Eternia has had would have to be their worst. He-Man says he doesn't believe that this is natural and actually may be of evil origin. And all that without the wonderful insight of the sorceress that we got from the last issue. I'm so glad she redeems herself in this issue. It doesn't take us long to find out that the tremors are being caused by the combined power of King Hiss and Skeletor as they try and tap what they only refer to as the ultimate power. It's also a great moment when we see again where great minds think alike of how they're going to stab each other in the back once each one gets it. So they lay down a Who's Your Mommy double whammy whammy and manage to raise the ultimate battleground. The two pat each other on the back on their success, but it quickly deteriorates into an argument as to who's going to take the central tower. King Hiss concedes to Skeletor's insistence that it be him, and though Skeletor got what he wanted, King Hiss rounds out the page with a maniacal laugh. Why is he so happy? I don't know, but I'd love to find out. When we see He-Man, he's letting the people know that after the quakes, the danger is past. A message from the sorceress, though, announces that that might be premature, and in fact he must come to Castle Grayskull for, get this, an explanation. Once at the castle, He-Man receives a crash course in ancient Eternian history from the sorceress, particularly around the three towers. It seems before Castle Grayskull there was Grayskull Tower, the focus of all good in the universe. Opposite that, Viper Tower, the focus of all evil. And for anyone who knows ancient mythology, what stands between them, in this case the central tower, is the focus of the two and therefore the ultimate power. She also explains that for fear of letting King Hiss get a hold of the central tower's power, yeah, I know that rhymes, the Eternian ancients sunk the ultimate battleground, forever denying King Hiss of that prize. But with Skeletor's help, they've risen the three towers and now approach the unguarded entrance. For old-school He-Man fans, you probably remember that the Ultimate Battleground was a playset that came out right near the end of the series. So what happens in the next few pages doesn't really add anything to the story, it's just there to show you what you can do with your new toy. We find out why King Hiss is so willing to let Skeletor take Central Tower first. Turns out its jaws are a booby trap, and though Skeletor slips by, Tongue Lasher isn't as lucky. As He-Man charges Grayskull Tower, he knocks Rattler into the dungeon where the gate slams shut. And King Hiss from Viper Tower, using its periscope feature, managed to keep tabs on everything happening outside. After only being in the tower for a few minutes, Skeletor already begins to absorb its power. He gets a warning from King Hiss that says that He-Man is on the way via the Skytrack, and Skeletor grabs one of the big cannons to blow him out of the sky. A well-timed save from Snoutspout drops He-Man at the top of the tower to face the now charged Skeletor. The supercharged Skeletor gets to do something I think he's wanted to do for a long time. Lay down a good right cross on He-Man. Ooh, that'll leave a mark. But just as Skeletor had received his power from the Ultimate Battleground, so too does He-Man begin to absorb the power. With Skeletor's advantage neutralized, he's thrown over the edge, knocking Tongue Lasher through, and now no longer powered up, he's left with nothing more than to do his own villain fist-shaking pose. Realizing had Skeletor not been alone, the battle might have been lost. He-Man tells Snoutspout to gather the other heroic warriors to now guard the three towers, because with their return, Eternia itself has been changed forever and become the ultimate battleground.
Hey friends and revolutionaries, welcome back to either the extended version of the video or part 2. I don't know how I'm doing this. I have no idea how I'll be able to do this. But if I have to split into 2 videos, I'm hedging my bets and giving you an extra hey. But yeah, if this is all in one video, it's my longest video ever, so wow. And if it isn't 2 separate videos, well, wow again. For this epically long pointless event of Masters of the Universe. I hope you're enjoying it so far. We're moving on now to the review portion, or a review portion. Now getting a look at the Pre-Eternian disguised He-Man. And this, of course, was the bonus figure for 2011. There's the shipping box. Says Master of the Universe. Says Pre-Eternian disguised He-Man. Got the Mattel logo, the adult collector, and the gibberish on the back. Contains figure and accessories. There's the He-Man. And, you know, one thing I gotta say is with the fact that the She-Ra figures are getting the sticker with the Princess of Power, the Horde figures are getting their Horde sticker, and with King Hiss, he's getting the Snake Man sticker. You know, it would be kind of cool that these pre-orders or these Club Eternia figures would get their own kind of sticker. You know, it's one of the things where they're part of a special group. You know, they could use that little metallic sunburst thing that they have and just say Club Eternia bonus figure. You know, just a little something to give you a pat in the back and saying, this is something extra because you promised us money. You know, something. I don't know. Maybe it's asking too much, but, you know, just something. Yeah, the Pre-Eternian disguised He-Man. You know, it's something where last year it was Wondar, the Wonder Bread He-Man figure. And, you know, he probably wasn't, you know, everybody's cup of tea because, you know, he was never really in the story. You know, he never had an appearance in the mini-coms. He never really had a role in the story or was ever an official character. He was just a rumor that they decided to run with, and it was great. Aside from the Green Goddess, I think that the Pre-Eternian disguised He-Man is probably the only other figure out there who actually has had an appearance that's probably a thorn in collectors' sides, especially if you're like a completist and you want all the figures that have been in the story, because he has a bonus figure for all of maybe 2.5 pages. Really, I mean, he shows up for such a little time. He's such a minor version of He-Man, and yet he plays such an important role in the story, it's not even funny. But you'll get a look at that. Let's take a look at the packaging. Like King Hiss, I mean, it's pretty much the same kind of thing. It's got the lightning bolts on the side, got the dimple, the logo, the brickwork, Pre-Eternian disguised He-Man, most powerful man in the universe. On the back, other figures that were during that time were Hordak, Hero, the Green Goddess, speaking of which, King Grayskull, Mossman, which I don't get it. I mean, I really think that Skeletor or King Hiss should have been here. Mossman I don't get. But then, of course, the Pre-Eternian disguised He-Man. On his write-up, it says, Pre-Eternian disguised He-Man, the most powerful man in the universe. Real name Adam of the House of Randor. So that's all straight from He-Man's card. Using the combined power of the Central Tower with the newly invented Cosmic Key, the Sorceress disguised He-Man and sent him back to Pre-Eternia, a time when his ancestor King Grayskull fought for freedom against the Horde invaders and Snake Men from the Nameless Dimension. Quickly allying himself with King Grayskull and the Wizard Warrior Hero, He-Man aided them in many battles, even turning the tide at the first Ultimate Battleground. During this battle, he learned the secrets of defeating the Snake Men, and with his knowledge returned to his own time, and finally stopped King Hiss once and for all. Disguised in a cloak and mask, He-Man cannot reveal his true identity to his own ancestors. Now, as we're going to see here in a moment, the first part of this story of this is true. I mean, as we saw, I mean, there's only been one part in the mini-coms of what I'm guessing is actually supposed to be the last 2 chapters. The fact that he actually allied himself with King Grayskull, that he played a major role in the first Ultimate Battleground battles, and then in the 3rd chapter going back and defeating King Hiss, because I've seen that same story in Dragon Ball Z. You know, when Trunks goes through and defeats Cell, and then goes back in time to beat him up, or goes back to his time to beat him up. It's the same idea, so I've seen it done before. That makes sense. It's a shame that we don't actually get it in a story mode, but you know what? Let's take a look at the actual mini-com events for the first chapter and see how it unfolds. Be right back.
Remember, the idea of these stories was to build a bridge that would take us from He-Man and the Masters of the Universe into the new series. And as any good trilogy does, King of the Snake Men and Ultimate Battleground put all the pieces in place for us to go to Pre-Eternia and experience the power of Grayskull in The Legend Begins. The final chapter opens with He-Man at the Three Towers contemplating recent events. The legend of King Hiss turning out to be true, the return of the Three Towers, makes He-Man believe that his lack of Pre-Eternia may turn out to be his greatest weakness during this time of change. The Sorceress tells him that by combining the powers of Grayskull Tower and the Cosmic Key, which was introduced back in that live-action movie back in 1987, with Dolph Lundgren, see how I bring it back? She's able to give him what he needs most, insight into the Pre-Eternian history. I do want to take just a quick moment to point out, because this is a great panel to show, that from the time the He-Man minicom started, the Sorceress was really just the Green Goddess, and then the Goddess, finally the Sorceress in a pink outfit, and as the series is finally starting to wind down, we get her in her orange, white, and blues from the Filmation series. That took a while, but we finally got her. In this time, the Sorceress shows that King Hiss's boast about dominating Eternia is true, but being in the past, they must not interfere with events unless extraordinary circumstances. Because they're not there guarding the gate, Skeletor, almost on cue, managed to infiltrate Grayskull Tower and find the portal in which they passed. Realizing that he's in Eternia's past, Skeletor sees the opportunity for him to rewrite Eternian history to help him in the present. He seeks out and reforms his alliance with King Hiss, Skeletor on a pterodactyl, King Hiss on a Tyrannosaurus Rex. It seems as though that riding dinosaurs is going to be a common theme under the power of Grayskull, kind of like the Flintstones. He-Man asks the Sorceress whether seeing King Hiss and Skeletor together in this time counts as one of those extraordinary circumstances in which they should be involved. Agreeing that it is, the Sorceress says that for reasons He-Man can't be told at this time, he must remain disguised from all those in Pre-Eternia. She creates a Triceratops with a whopping big gun for him to use, and it's kind of telling when you think about it. I mean, ancient Eternians came up with guns before the wheel. Figure that one out. He-Man makes an impressive strike against the Snake Men, but King Hiss's Tyrannosaurus Rex is more than a match for He-Man's Triceratops. Knocked from his dinosaur, He-Man draws a sword, but Skeletor manages to pluck it away, still not recognizing that it's He-Man. Alone, unarmed, and surrounded by Snake Men, the odds against He-Man look long, until a mysterious stranger steps out and with a magical staff strikes at Skeletor. And though He-Man retrieves his sword and begins to turn the tide of battle, the mysterious figure uses his magical staff to lay down a super double Who's Your Daddy whammy whammy, and return all those who don't belong back from which they came. For King Hiss, this means back to his encampment in the Barren Plains, Skeletor back to Snake Mountain, and He-Man and Sorceress back to Castle Grayskull. They're both quite impressed with the power of the mysterious stranger, and after years of adventures in the minicoms, the final panel is of He-Man asking the most appropriate question to lead into the new story. Who was he?
And so that closes out the minicom stories. After all the years of collecting, that's how the minicom story came to an end. And back then, no one knew that was going to be the last issue. Everyone was expecting more. Being older, and as I mentioned that with the release of King Hiss, along with this figure, I look back on it and I'm not disappointed. I am very, very satisfied with the stories, and I think it ended very well considering the direction they were trying to go with it. Now that I'm older and I understand, in a lot of ways, if you're doing bookends, the Green Goddess kind of stands as being the first part or the front of the bookends, because she was in the first issue of the minicoms, and the Pre-Eternia disguised He-Man works as the end of that bookend, or as the bookend there, because he was the kind of major one in the end of the minicom legacy. So a very cool character to get, one that if you subscribed, I hope you didn't write this guy off, because he's actually very cool. If you have him, go back and take another look at him now. Think a little bit more about what took place and what was going on at that time, and you may find that you're going to move him up a little bit on your display shelf. You may get a slightly better place than you might have initially given him. Of course, as a figure goes, he is pretty plain. I mean, I don't think they went too far out of the way putting him together, but he's still actually really nice. I mean, he uses the arms from the Toys R Us He-Man. all of the wristbands, you can tell. The articulation we'll get to here in a minute, but I want to mention on the boots. The boots look great. They're still kind of the orangish red He-Man boots, but very, very tight ankles. Despite the fact that we can see the peg, it's very tight ankles. Good rocker joint. Very nice rocker joint. The straps, again, darker straps, not like a regular He-Man boot, but actual darker stripes. And the white fur, you know, definitely means, just set him apart from He-Man and kind of completes his disguise. You know, it actually looks really cool. It's got the white belt with a chip on it, but yeah, you know, can't be perfect. Or at least I don't expect it to be. Again, we'll get to the accessories here in a moment, which I kind of want to give you guys a shot of his back, because I'll talk about that some more in a minute too. But great sculpting on the hood. Now that we've got this kind of hood, now that they've made this kind of hood, I hope they do reuse it and do a new Skeletor head. You know, not that I'm displeased with the one they've got. I think it's a very vintage head. But I think now they've got one that actually comes down a little bit further, will kind of fill in the gap, especially if you use the Keldor cape. You know, doing a Skeletor head with this hood would actually be really kind of cool. Maybe if they do another weapons pack, they'll include some new heads, like an actual blonde Teela, not the Ultimate Battleground, but a blonde Teela. You know, for the one we already got, that would be cool. And then a Skeletor using this head. You can see there's He-Man with his mask, and it's actually pretty good how they pretty much took the front of his face and kind of put the mask in there. I'm not sure if that's. Yeah, that's actually sculpted in. That's not just paint. They actually sculpted the mask onto his face. The cloak he's wearing, the top part of his cloak, kind of looks a bit like a monk. But it actually has, and this is another thing that makes King Hiss so much stranger, is he actually has the pegs so that you can take the top part of his armor off. So, pre-Eternian disguised He-Man can take his top part of his robes off. King Hiss can't take off his scales. I don't know. Something about King Hiss's armor, I guess. He does have kind of this robe skirt thing. Has a split in it. So, well, we'll get to the articulation first here. Talk about the head. It does go up and down. Turns left and right. So no issues with the head whatsoever. As a matter of fact, when you take the peg off, you can see that it comes pretty flush to the rest of the body. You know, you can kind of go up and down a little bit, but it comes pretty flush. Arms come up and out. Twist at the shoulder, bicep, elbow, and wrist. And while we're talking about the arms, with the armor that he has, his arms kind of don't come down straight. They're kind of, pushed out a little bit. And when I first saw him, when I first kind of got him out and posed him, I kind of thought he kind of reminds me of Ralphie's brother Randy from A Christmas Story. I can't put my arms down. It's something where, yeah, depending on how you pose him, it's not going to be that noticeable. But believe me, whenever you have him just standing, yeah, it's not going to go straight down. There's going to be out a bit because of the fact that the armor pushes his arms out. Does have the twist, crunch at the waist. Leg does twist, comes forward, back, and it does come out a little bit, but yeah. Bend at the elbow, twist at the boot, which is actually very tight. There you go, twist to the boot, and I've already shown the foot. So very, very cool. Now, about his accessories. First off, I'll get it out of the way. As I mentioned in the comic portion, the story portion, he does come with this whopping big gun, which I believe was supposed to be the accessory that came with the Triceratops for the Power of Grayskull line. But I mean, it is huge. I mean, this is a huge, huge gun. And let me put it in his hand here. I was almost hoping it would be big enough for Titus to hold, but not quite. It's big, but it's not giant. The shoulder, the butt of the shoulder of the gun fits up against his shoulder. Actually, it's sculpted pretty nice on there. It's just something where you can't hold it in both hands. Really, it's not made to do that very well. So, big rifle. He-Man can do it with one hand. He can do it. One thing that wasn't even shown in the minicom, and unless you've seen that 2007 movie, is the Cosmic Key. Now, they never even showed it. It was just so briefly mentioned, but I guess it left such a impression on fans that, yeah, but the fact that it was mentioned in the comic was enough to give it to him as an accessory. So whether or not this means we'll ever actually get a Gwildor, I don't know. I don't really want one, but yeah, I got the Cosmic Key. Looks actually really nice. It's very true to the way it showed in the cartoon or in the movie. One cool thing about it too is that the keys on it, I guess these are the keys, the buttons, but here they actually spin around. So that's actually pretty good. And it was always shown in the preview pictures of He-Man holding it like so, kind of like a club. So again, unless you were in the know ahead of time, showing He-Man here holding the Cosmic Key, you know, may just have given you the impression that he had some big spiky club. They never really showed it in the previews, and I was very, very concerned about it. But yes, they did give him his sword, because there's actually a moment in which he loses it and then he gets it back. So it was very important to me that we got a sword, and we weren't disappointed. They did give us his power sword. You know, it's the generic silver one, but he got it. That's what's important. Now, as I was saying on the back, there's no place to put it. Like Prince Adam, you know, you can see the lines on the back. You can kind of see the darker paint for the fabric, and it's very nicely sculpted. But there's no place for him to hold a sword. You know, with both pre-disguised Eternian He-Man and the Prince Adam, there's nothing back here. There's no sculpting or anything back here that should keep him from being able to put his sword in. Why they don't do that, I don't know. Every time I think that they're starting to get it right and they actually put something on there so that they can actually hold their weapons, this sort of thing comes up. And I'm like, come on, guys. You're doing so well. Oh, well. Like I said, he is still a very cool figure. Very cool character to have. Very, very happy to have gotten him. For anyone who was displeased about getting, come on now. Sorry, I'm trying to work around my camera while I mess with him. For anyone who might have been a little disappointed or displeased that this was going to be the figure that we got, don't be. He's actually a real jewel, and I hope you guys all enjoy him. I'm going to go ahead and take you out with just a little bit more of information about the mini-coms. Hope you guys enjoy it. Rate, comment, subscribe, join the revolution. See you soon.
It was years later that we were to find out that the stranger in question was in fact the Wizard Hero, ancient ancestor to He-Man and the central character for the Power of Grayskull story. For die-hard He fans, there are two minicom stories that take place after the Ultimate Battleground, but before the legend begins, and so technically could be considered to be part of the arc, but for what they contributed is so small, it hardly warrants this point of interest footnote. But here you go. In Enter Buzzsaw Hordak, Hordak sees that the three towers have been returned, and comments that he actually helped build one of the three towers. Later in the story, he actually reveals that the three towers contain the power of time travel, something that wasn't really necessary considering that in The Legend Begins, the sorceress already uses the power of Grayskull Tower and the Cosmic Key to open the portal to the past. The second story being the Cosmic Key. This officially introduces Gwildor to the minicom history, and though the events have nothing to do with the Ultimate Battleground or The Legend Begins, it does show us what the Cosmic Key is and that Gwildor created it. One final point of interest that I think really does belong here is that on the Giant Titus's bio, it actually says that during a brief treaty with his enemies, he helped construct one of the three towers. Now, so far, the Master Universe Classic line has not defined the three towers or the Ultimate Battleground. So, the Ultimate Battleground minicom, I think, really does put in context what an important role he played in Pre-Eternia. Now, as I mentioned, these three stories are not the official trilogy leading to the Power of Grayskull, but you can really get a good idea of the direction the story was heading, as well as the genesis and the idea behind the 2000X series. Had the King Hiss figure and Pre-Eternian He-Man not been released so close together, I may never have rediscovered the stories in the way I did, but I'm quite thankful I have. I do hold out hope that the Power of Grayskull story may yet still be told, either as a comic or even as an animated series, because I do think it would be a worthy addition to the Power of Grayskull and He-Man lore.